Our next speaker, I've known him for and worked with him in many capacities for about 10 years at this point. He is one of the most prolific independent researchers I've known, and he recently rejoined Daydream to lead our research effort around world models and real-time AI. And he's done a lot of open source work in some of the projects that many of you have probably heard of. And recently he led the creation of Daydream Scope, which is one of the tools that I just demoed earlier. So here to talk about the new creative medium, we have Yondon Fu.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? All right, sweet. Hey everyone, my name is Yondon, and thanks for the introduction, Eric. And the past few talks were like pretty hardcore and super interesting, but this one is going to be slightly more oriented around what I see as like the intersection between some of the research and creative applications. So what I want to talk about today is real-time AI video as a creative medium. Why think about any particular technology as a medium as opposed to a tool? So one way to think about it is a tool typically is something that we use to achieve a very specific outcome and has a very specific purpose. A medium, on the other hand, is interesting in that it's more so something that we can play with. It's more of a material that we can play with. And medium is something that we usually play with in order to try to uncover new, novel, interesting possibilities that are typically enabled, uniquely enabled by the affordances and the limitations of a new technology. So obviously, there's a lot of merit and value to be derived from focusing on the tool side of things. But I think focusing on the medium side of things is interesting because oftentimes, when we have a new technology, it's unclear what exactly the exact use cases that will emerge from it will be. Sometimes it's obvious, oftentimes it's not. And by treating something as play, something for vast, diverse communities to experiment with at the edges, we oftentimes end up with new emergent use cases that would be pretty hard to imagine from the very beginning, just thinking about it on your own. I think a good example of this is game engines. So take something like Unreal or Unity that many of you might be familiar with, and ostensibly, game engines are made in order to make games. You can use a game engine like Unreal to create something like Fortnite. But since the start of the development of game engines and the advent of real-time 3D rendering, we've ended up doing a lot more things with game engines than I think most people would have expected. So today, we use game engines for virtual production. Virtual production is used for new types of filmmaking so that the director, the actors, the set people can all sit in the same place and in real time interact, make creative decisions with real-time 3D rendered background scenes composited directly into the scenes that actors are acting in, and then have that be projected in real time on an LED wall so that you can feel like you are in the place that you're supposed to be filming, all without actually being there in person. So I don't know if anyone thought we would be using game engines for that 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. And then we also have things like art installations, increasing the level of immersion and presence that are achievable when a typical person walks into an art installation by leveraging the affordances of real-time 3D rendering. And lastly, modeling things in the physical world, so things like architecture visualization. Being able to understand the aesthetics and physical properties of a design that you're interested in without investing the upfront effort of doing it all in the physical world immediately. So I think that is, to me, something like the fact that we do all these things with something that started off just being for games, I think hopefully illustrates that when we treat it as a creative medium for people to experiment with at the edges, who knows where we will be in a year, 2 years, 5 years, a decade. Coming back to the theme of this presentation, we care about real-time AI video. So why is real-time AI video something that is worth thinking about specifically as a medium? And I'll break this down into 2 parts. So I'll focus on the AI video part, and then I'll go to the real-time part. I think one of the unique affordances of AI, at least in this modern era, is that it allows you to generate what seems like almost an infinite number of subjective interpretations of any complex topic or idea. And this can be driven by a consumer that starts to look a little bit more like a creator because they're actively participating in the creation of all these interpretations. So to make this more concrete, there's this essay that I really like that came out earlier this year from a science fiction author, Ken Liu. And this is in the text domain. But he talks about his experience translating a Chinese poem using LLMs. But the most remarkable thing about that experience is not getting a really good canonical translation for the Chinese poem. The remarkable thing to him was that all of a sudden, he could take all these different lenses on the same poem and ask, hey, what does this Chinese poem mean from the standpoint of someone that leans more authoritarian? What does this mean if it is from someone that leans more democratic? What does it mean for someone that has no notion of kind of traditional Chinese culture and is more grounded in modern Chinese culture? And the richness of that experience is what made it interesting for him, because all of a sudden, him as a consumer of this poem became a creator in this process of exploring all these subjective interpretations. Going into the video world, the example that I'm going to talk about isn't an AI thing, but hopefully it can kind of set the stage about where things might go. As a show of hands, how many people here are familiar with the show Bandersnatch from Netflix? Okay, so a good amount of people. High-level overview, this was something that came out a couple years ago, and the general premise was that it was a Black Mirror episode, science fiction, but the twist was that it was choose your own adventure. There were predefined branching points in the show where the viewer could decide path A, path B, path C, and then depending on what they chose, you would end up with a very different storyline. And okay, minor spoilers here. If you don't want spoilers, don't look at the right side. But the left side is basically what you ended up with Bandersnatch, this gigantic flowchart of alternate universes and interpretations of the same storyline that vary depending on what path that you chose. And all of this can begin with just one of the choices, like the one on the right. Do you throw your tea over the computer, or do you yell at your dad? And then depending on what you choose, the storyline ends up different, and the video playback ends up looking different. So this is in a pre-generative AI era, but I think this is an interesting example because this showcased, an interesting format where just given a predefined set of branching points and choices, it completely changed the experience for the end viewer. And I think the next question to ask is, what does this look like when any point in the timeline can be a branching point, and you can make any choice just via natural language prompting about where you want to go next? So in summary, I think the interestingness of AI video comes down to, for me, this ability to explore these rich subjective interpretations of a single idea and be able to do that as not just a creator, but a consumer that starts looking a little bit more like a creator. I'll move on to the second part, real time. So in order to illustrate this, once again, as a show of hands, how many people here would consider themselves a gamer? Okay, that's helpful. So for the gamers, you are familiar with this, but for everyone else, cutscenes. Video game cutscenes are an integral part of narrative storytelling in video games as a medium. And I think the evolution of cutscenes in video games is really a story about a deeper and deeper blending of cinematic storytelling with interactive gameplay, with player control and responsiveness as first-class citizens in the design. And what I'm about to go through, I intend to illustrate how, with video games as a medium, they have basically really focused on the real-time control and responsive nature of the medium over many years in order to create deeper immersion and presence. So at the very beginning, we started with hard cuts. So this means that you would render your cutscene differently than you would render your gameplay. It would typically be like a movie-like video that then jumps to the interactive gameplay. And that led to really rich visuals in the video, but a little bit of a jarring experience because you're basically jumping between two different aesthetics. And it really takes away from the immersion and sense of presence. But we moved pretty quickly to real-time cutscenes, so games like Half-Life, where now the cutscene and the gameplay are rendered using the same engine. We're using game engines for everything. And now it feels a little bit more natural from going to a cutscene from gameplay, but it still feels a little bit discontinuous, but that's what led to smoother and seamless transitions. So games like Last of Us, where by focusing on novel techniques around how you control camera movement and player controls, you start blurring the boundaries between what is a video or what is narration and a cutscene and what is gameplay. Because as you're playing the game, it naturally fades into a cutscene, and you start wondering, like, am I still in gameplay or am I in a cutscene now? And I think the natural conclusion of this is just continuous play. There is no difference between the two. And more recent games like God of War, or the remastered remake version, you have cutscene up top, gameplay down below, and it's a single continuous experience. Your narrative is integrated really deeply into the gameplay itself, so you might be walking around in an open world, and there's dialogue happening, you're interacting with people, and that is the narrative. That is the cinematic experience. There's no difference between the two. And that is ultimately where the video game industry has gone over many decades. And I highlight this because the magic of focusing on the medium in this way is that by giving the player increasing amounts of real-time control in a highly responsive manner, you create this deeper and deeper sense of immersion and presence that would not be possible in any other medium, and it creates the video games that we're used to today. In summary, I would say AI video gives us infinite subjective interpretations where users can become creators, and real-time gives us immersion and presence that's only possible when you give people more real-time control with high responsiveness. So this is something that I think is really interesting to experiment with as a community, and part of our work over at Daydream recently has been how do we encourage more of that experimentation and how do we do more of it ourselves. Part of this effort has emerged in the form of this tool called Scope. Scope is a sandbox and tool for running and customizing real-time interactive generation. And we released an alpha version of this recently, and the intent is to iterate on this with the community in public, starting off supporting great recent releases like Stream Diffusion v2 and LongLive, which are both autoregressive video diffusion models. And the intent is to support more and more models over time, A, make them easy to use, but B, more importantly, expose the raw capabilities as much as possible so that people can play with them in real time and focus on the interactive portion of it. So in practice, what does this look like? So we have real-time parameter controls, and what this video showcases here is the ability to, while using Stream Diffusion v2, mess with this noise scale parameter. So some people might be familiar with what this means, some people might not, but the basic idea is that in real time, you can say, how much do I want to rely on what I already have, and how much do I want to rely on the creative liberty of the model? And you can, in real time, see the response of the model change based on those dynamic sliders. We've also been playing with what I like to call selective forgetting. So what this video, I don't know if it's illustrated properly, but I'll just describe it. What this video shows is resetting the cache of a model. So you can think of it as making a model forget. And in the earlier presentations, I feel like this limitation of models today was highlighted as, forgetting stuff over time. But I think it's interesting to think about what if that's a feature, not a bug in certain cases. What if you want your model to forget? Because if you can make the model forget while you're generating, that allows you to do things like resetting things, going back in time. And that's something that we've been playing around with. So in this video, we play around with controlling time in the interactive experience. So instead of thinking of it as a single continuous generation and you're just prompting the entire time, what if you can freeze time? What if you can pause the generation, make changes, resume, and then update the settings and have that happen dynamically? And what's not shown here is, going back to the cache idea, something that we plan on shipping in next couple of days, next week or so, is rewinding time. So if you know that the model has a limited memory, what does it mean for you to say, hey, I don't like what you just did, go back a couple steps and let's repeat that over and over again? And that feels like something that is net new in a way that you would use these models that you wouldn't use in a different medium. And some things that we have coming up next. This is definitely playing off the Bandersnatch idea, but it's this notion of malleable timelines. So if we think about interactive generation as this building up of a sequence of actions over time in order to generate a video, what does it look like when you can build up a sequence of actions and a timeline for your generation, but then also export that, give that to someone else, and allow them to replay it and remix it however they want? And that leads to a question that kind of informed this presentation that I'm thinking about now, and I'd encourage people here to think about, which is, what does it mean to play with video generation or interactive real-time video generation as replayable and remixable world exploration? What do I mean by that? That's a lot of words. By replayable, I mean that I can do a video generation in real time, but then you can retrace my steps, all the parameters I touched, all the prompts that I touched, and then basically relive that experience. And by remixable, I mean you can retrace my steps, but at each step of the way, you can make a different choice. So going back to the Bandersnatch analogy, you can retrace the steps that I take for my storyline, but at any point in time, you can fork off and do something different. And that's really up to you. And this goes back to the idea of infinite subjective interpretations that's uniquely enabled by AI video. So that's a quick summary of some of the experiments that we've been doing and why I think real-time AI video is interesting as a unique medium in itself, and not just as a tool to help us do faster video generation or to help us do the things we already know how to do, but better and cheaper. If you're interested in checking out some of the experiments that we're doing with the Scope tool, I have a QR code here that'll take you to the GitHub. We'll also be hanging out in the workshop section later today if people want to learn how to use it or learn more. And if you want to stay updated on kind of work in this area, my handle is Yondon Fu at various social media platforms, and we're all talking about this in the Daydream Discord as well. So that's all that I got. Thank you.